Okay, good morning, good afternoon. You noticed that I had a couple of lessons on Facebook, Westside uh, page that's on Facebook, also on YouTube. So today, as I promised you, I would go over adding and subtracting fractions. And both of them have the same concept. But first, I want to direct your attention. I'm going to point to some steps, some rules here that we go through. Number one says, look at the denominators to see if they are the same number. If they have the same number, then add numerators and the denominators stay the same. When you add and subtracting fractions, as you get to the equivalent, always remember, you're never adding denominators. You're never subtracting denominators. So, as I go through, as you can tell, I had to improvise in here, so I'm using my ladder kind of like a prop. When we talk about step 2, and I'm going to get to these and explain them to you, but I want to touch on some of the steps. If the denominators are different, then, that should be then look at the small denominator and see if you can multiply a number to get the large denominator. If so, that is your least common multiple. Now, for parents that's listening, in our day, least common multiple was called least common denominator. It's the same thing. It's called least common multiple, or LCM. Multiply, you can convert the equivalent fraction and complete the fraction. What this is simply saying, that if you have the fraction 1/4 and 1/8, and you take the small denominator 4, if you can multiply something by 4 to get 8, then that's your least common denominator. That's your least common multiple. You don't have to go through the other steps to get there. So I'm going to go a little further on step 3. Step 3 says, now, if you cannot multiply the small denominator and get the large denominator, then you have to list the multiples of both numbers. And when we say multiples, we're talking about nothing but the multiplication table. For example, if I had 6, it'd be 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, and so forth. And so you have to list the multiples of both numbers until you get two numbers alike. So I use an example. Suppose your two denominators was 3 and 4. You notice that 3 is your small denominator. There's nothing that you can multiply to get 4. So now you have to list the multiples. And multiples, if you notice here, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, and so forth. 4 times 1, you keep going until you see two numbers that's alike. When you get to two numbers that's alike, then, which is 12, 12 is your least common multiple. Once you get there, then you can go ahead to the next steps that we're going to talk about. So, I want to talk about here. This is where you convert the fractions to equivalent fractions. Once you convert, you are ready to solve the problem. Note, once converted, you only add the numerators. If we're adding, if you're subtracting, you only subtract the numerators. Denominators stay the same. Now notice that this only applies to adding and subtracting fraction. Multiplication and division of fraction is a different concept. So, one of the things I want to turn over here now is to misconceptions that students make. One of the first things students do when they add fractions like 1/4 plus 1/3, they will add 1 plus 1 is 2, 4 plus 3 is 7. That is wrong. Students add numerator and they add denominator. There's nothing that you can do with this fraction until both of these numbers are converted to equivalent fractions. Now, I want to go over here. First, I talked about, and I want to go through some models. I talked about if the denominators are the same. For example, 1/5 plus 2/5. If these are the same, all you need to do is add the numerators, 1 plus 2 is 3. Your denominators will stay the same. Now, I want you to notice this model, and I want you to visualize it. You may have to work with it at home some. I want you to look at where I made 1/5. You notice I colored in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That represents 1/5. This represents 2/5. 1, 2, 2/5. And I just simply added them. I made a model. I added them. I added 1/5. I added 2/5. Denominator stayed the same, and that's 3/5. This is pretty easy. If these are the same, all you do is add those. And so that's not a problem. What I want to go through now is a model of 1/3 plus 1/4. Now you're going to have to use your imagination with this and see it. Notice I made a model of 1/3 and I made a model of 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice what I did. I want you to see this. I made 1/3, 1, 2, 3. It looks the same. There's that 1/3. Then I took the 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What I want you to visualize is I took this here and I put it on top of the 1/3. That's all I did. Now notice, once I put that on top, I came back to the 1/3 to count how many blocks I had. I had 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. I came to my 1/4 block and I counted 1, 2, 3. So 1/4 is equivalent to 3/12. You say, well, Mr. Roberts, where did you get the 12s from? The 12s is the total number of blocks. That's your least common multiple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 4/12 plus 3/12 equals 7/12. That is using a model. Now, you can use a model, but when we preparing students for 10 Ready test, notice that 10 Ready a lot of times is a time test. A lot of times you have 28 questions, 45 minutes, which is less than 2 minutes a question. So we're going to go through how to model. The first one I'm going to do is how many of you parents learn how to do math. It's called the traditional model. This is your traditional model here. 1/3 plus 1/4. Notice these denominators are not the same. So I can't do anything with this fraction until I convert them to an equivalent fraction. So I came down, like I showed you earlier, I listed the multiples and 12 was the multiple. Now I've got to convert 1/3. Here's how you do it. You write down 1/3. This is your new denominator. You say 3 times what equal 12? Well, 3 times 4 equal 12. So now you're going to multiply that 4 by this numerator. Now this numerator is not going to always be 1. It could be 6, 7, 8, whatever it is. In this case, it's 1. 1 times 4 equals 4. So now I know 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. Now I say 4 times what equal 12? That's 3. 1 times 3 is 3. 4, 3, 7/12. That's the traditional method. That's for people that's kind of fluent in their multiplication. But most of my students, we've talked about another way. And so this may be something new for some of you parents, but it most of the students try to do it this way. I want you to notice, I'm going to take this 1/3 and I'm going to take this 1/4 again. And this is how we do here. Notice we take this 1/3 and then we take whatever this denominator is and we multiply it 4 over 4 and we multiply this by this 1/3. We take this fraction here and whatever this denominator is, we put it over here. Now, I always tell my students to rewrite this so they don't mess up. In other words, 1 times 4, 3 times 4, 1 times 3, 4 times 3. 1 times 4 is 4, 3 times 4 is 12, 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 3 is 12. Notice once again, your denominator stay the same and you add your numerators. Now, I want you to notice that I tell my students, when you get to multiplication of fraction, this is multiplication of fraction. However, we're using it in adding and subtraction. But this is actually multiplication of fractions. Okay, now I'm going to go back and give you another example of what I said in my steps. When I said if the denominators you can multiply, let me back up and I'll explain it why I'm doing it. If you have 1/4 plus 1/8, the first thing is look at the denominators, they're different. Here's the easiest step if you know your multiplication. Here, and I'm going to show you here. Here, let me go here first, since I've done that. If you can multiply something by 4 to get 8, you have found your least common multiple. 8 times what equal 8 is 1. 1 times 1 equal 1. 4 times what equal 8 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. And the denominators stay the same. Now I want you to notice, most of the time when you use the least common multiple, that fraction is going to be in simplest form. If you notice, by me using the least common multiple, when I finished adding this fraction, it was in simplest form. Now, most of the time I don't show my students this because a lot of the tests that we took, they gave the answer in simplest form. And most of my students did not know when they got to this. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. They used, let me go back. They used this model right here when they did it. So I'm going to show you the same thing. You can multiply both of them denominators to get a common denominator. It's not your least common multiple, but it will actually solve the fraction. However, if that fraction is in simplest form, you have to know how to simplify fraction, and I show students how to simplify fractions by using the greatest common multiple of both of those numbers. But notice if you multiply these two fractions, 4 and 8, and you get 32, you can do that. You say 8 times 4 equals 32, that's 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 4 times what equals 32? Is 8. 1 times 8 is 8. You add it up, you get 12 over 32. If you use the other model, 1/4, and you use this denominator, 8 over 8, and you take 1/8 and you use the 4, you're going to get 12 over 32. Notice this side is not in simplest form. Notice that this will simplify to this, but if you use the simplest, the least common multiple, a lot of times you don't have to use another step. And what I noticed when we were taking our Master Connect test, many students knew how to solve the problem. The problem is the answer was in simplest form. So they didn't know what to do. And then they had forgot how to simplify. So they had this on their paper, but that answer was not there, and they just picked one, and a lot of times they missed how to get that answer. So most of the time I recommend you use the least common multiple. It saves a lot of time. I know that's a lot of information, but you'll be able to slow this down. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, leave me something to let me know what you don't understand. And then I'll be able to go back and answer those questions. Now let me go back here. You notice that math, if you multiplying, you can use division and check your answer. If you dividing, you can multiply. If you adding, you can subtract. If you subtracting. Now fractions are no different. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. If I add these fractions here, what we did, 1/4 plus 1/3, it got 7/12. I want to direct you back over here where I'm going to check my work. I'm going to take, my answer was 7/12. And so I'm going to subtract 1/3, and 1/3 should give me 1/4. If I get 1/4, that means I have that problem right. I'm going to do the same thing. 3 times what equals 12? 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 12 times what equals 12? 1. And that equals 7. 7 minus 4 equals 3. Denominator stay the same. Now 3/12, I went to show you where the students had to use the greatest common factor. Well, in this case, the greatest common factor with 12 and 3 down there is 3. So I divided 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So you'll notice all of those numbers are present. There's your 7/12, there's your 1/3, and there's your 1/4. So we got it right. And it doesn't matter which one of these you use. Over here, I just did the opposite. I took the 1/4 and subtracted 7/12. Did the same thing. 4 times what equals 12? That's 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 12 times what equals 12? And that was 1. And 7. 7 minus 3 is 4/12. 4/12, once again, I had to use the greatest common factor. And I did. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So once again, there's my 7/12. My 7/12. There is my 1/4. And there's my 1/3. All of those are here to let me know that I did that right. Now I'm going to go one more thing before I close out this lesson. I thought I had one more thing. I guess I didn't. I guess that was it. I know I had something. I don't know what I did with it. My granddaughter, she is filming me. But I think that's pretty much it. So let me just sum up real quick what we talked about. Number one, we talked about the steps. The first steps to doing fraction is to look at the denominator. First, to see if they're the same. If they're the same, you simply just add your numerators and then your denominator stay the same. If they're not, we talked about a couple of ways to do them. And you can pick, well actually we talked about 3. One, we talked about getting the least common multiple, doing it this way. We talked about another way, doing it this way. So you can utilize whichever one you want. Now, I sent you some worksheets, parents. One is the students can work on, the other one have the answer sheet. Also, while I got you, I also assigned I-ready lessons. And those I-ready lessons that I'll update from weeks, please go in and do those I-ready lessons. So, until next time, be safe and take a look at this handsome face. So, thank you.